Welcome to Principles of Management. I'm Stephen Hall. I'll be your instructor for this block. We're going to do this format for every chapter that we have. The first week's assignments are chapter 1, 2, and 3. This is going to be chapter 1 that we're going over. And then if you have any questions on how to work anything after tomorrow night, look on the link for my start of my class and my welcome. I'll do it with my in-class students and my Zoom students at the same time and post that as well. Chapter 1 covers management and managers. The first question is, what is a manager? Answer, a person responsible for supervising the use of an organization's resources to meet its goals. The key part of this slide is supervising the use of an organization's resources. As a manager, we manage people, but we also have the resources at our disposal to use as well, and we're responsible for that as much as we are the people. Our text defines management as the planning, organizing, leading, and controlling of human and other resources to achieve organizational goals effectively and efficiently. Organizational performance is measured in two different ways. It's through efficiency and effectiveness. Efficiency is defined as a measure of how well or how productively resources are used to achieve a goal. Effectiveness is a measure of the appropriateness of the goals an organization is pursuing and the degree to which the organization achieves these goals. There's a key difference in the two. They're not really the same thing at all. It's very possible to be efficient and not effective. Sometimes you can be effective and not efficient. And really how this is defined is it best to do things right or to do the right things? Management, and what will be a driving theme throughout the rest of this course, will focus on to do the right things. Now, while it's very important to do things correctly and in the right manner, again, you can still do those, but yet not have effectiveness in an organization. Effectiveness speaks to what your mission is or what it is you set out to do, and are you actually achieving that? There are 4 tasks of management that each manager will be responsible for. First is planning, then organizing, then leading, and then controlling. As the slide depicts, one leads into the next, and it's a constant cycle for each thing that you do. So when you're planning, you should choose your appropriate organizational goals and courses of the best action to achieve these goals. The key part of this is the best course of actions to achieve your goals, which tells you should have some goals set up and what it is you want to get to do. Your planning should speak towards your effectiveness. What is it you're trying to accomplish is what you should decide before you ever start. Many times people jump right into the leading, sometimes the organizing, and many managers make the mistake of trying to control. However, if you do not start with planning and getting the right goal, you won't have your roadmap to get you where you need to be. So it's very key that we go with planning. Next is to organize. You need to establish a task and authority. Each person that you're leading on your team, small group or whatever you have, or if it's just yourself, you got to know what task you're supposed to do and what authority relationships are there. So if you have a team, it's you need to let everybody know how that thing is going to work, how it's set up, what relationships are expected. And if you're a team of one, your relationship with your customer, go ahead and define that, and your relationship with who you are reporting to as well. If you do this quickly and effectively, then you'll have a better chance of achieving your goals. Without a good organization, you can have a very good plan, but then it doesn't get towards the effectiveness. Again, efficiency does come in with organizing, though. If you're not organized well, it's very hard to be efficient. Again, being efficient is important, but it's only part of it. If you're not effective, then you're not doing your job as a manager. Next is leading. leading is motivating, coordinating, and energizing individuals and groups to work together to achieve their goals. This is more of the art side of it. You need to know how to motivate, coordinate the people on your team, energize them to do things that they normally wouldn't do, and that's really where leading is. If you're only getting the performance out of them that they would have done anyway, then what are you needed as a manager? Why are you there as a manager or leader of that group? So that's where the motivation comes. But motivation also comes from a well-organized team, which leads back to a detailed plan with well-defined goals. Next is controlling. You got to establish accurate and measuring and monitoring systems to evaluate how well the organization has achieved its goals. So throughout the process, you'll be trying to control your team. But the best way to do this is not the sense of control by, hey, I told you to do this, you must do this because I'm the boss. While certainly that can work if you have the right relationship, it will likely not lead to motivate or energize individuals to do things they otherwise wouldn't do. The best way to control is to go ahead and establish what measures that you're going to evaluate each person by, the project by, the overall goals that you have. So you need to know exactly how you want to measure that. So you have to have some kind of metric in place that tells you how you're doing. And ideally, this can be looked at throughout the entire process. And that happens, that leads back to your plan. Then it goes in that circular motion, as we mentioned at the start of the slide, is reevaluate your plan. Look at your organizational goals. Are you meeting those now because of what you've learned and going through the process? Does anything need to shift or change? And then back to reorganizing if you need to. Continue to lead, and then continue to look at your control measures. Let's talk a little bit more about the planning process. As a manager, you need to identify and select the appropriate organizational goals and courses of actions. Now, many times as a manager, you don't get to select your organizational goals. They're set for you. If you do have the luxury of coming up with your own goals, be sure you get a prior approval before setting off on the goals that you have set from your hires or your higher-ups, and which course of action are you going to take. Also, as a manager, it is best that you have approval from your boss as to which course of action that you recommend that they also buy off on. Also, if you have the luxury of doing this, and most times you should, take your different courses of action and run them by your team so that your team can look and see and give feedback on those. And if you need to combine 1-2 courses of action, change them. But this will help you achieve buy-in. Once you have decided on your goals and your course of actions, next thing you need to do is develop your strategy at which you're going to get this done. Once you make your strategy, you need to also be the same as you did with your goals and your course of action. Ensure at this point that your boss understands what strategy you want to do and approves it, and that your whole team understands this is the strategy that you're going to use. The difference in the organizational goals and the course of action is the strategy that you have developed. Once it is done, we shouldn't be discussing that. It just should be a communication plan up and down, because the strategy should support your goals and your courses of action. So it's less talk at this point, just more communication as to everybody understands this is how you're going to get after the particular project or problem that you're working. The 3 steps of planning: you need to know which goals to pursue, of course, strategies to attain these goals, and how to allocate resources. Now, and we started that off with the earlier slide about resources as a manager. It is key. Now, many people make this mistake as a manager. They focus usually, or a lot of times, entirely on the people that they're managing and not really the resources that they have. Resources will be throughout your entire career as a manager very key. How you use those, if you're going to be able to attain your goals and make a profit for your company or your organization, or be effective for them. Resources affect everything in by the term definition resources just means they're going to be scarce. You never have everything that you need to get the job done. So as a manager in your planning, through each phase, always evaluate what resources are available to you, and see how you can best put those towards your goals. When organizing any team or group that you're working with or on, you want to group your people in departments according to the kinds of job-specific tasks they perform. Next, the managers will lay out their lines of authority and responsibility. Now, this part gets overlooked often as well. Do not assume that everybody knows what their responsibility is and what the lines of authority are, who they report to, when they report, and in what manner they should report. That should all be laid out early on in any planning process or in the organizing process before you ever start work on any project. It is a good idea that when you lay out the lines of authority and the responsibility of each one, that each team member have a brief back to you as to how they define that. They should tell you what they heard that you told them. This will ensure continuity. Many times you'll find out once you lay out your lines of authority and your responsibility that you've missed something when they briefed you back. They'll not understand that a report's due at a certain time, or they won't understand who they need to report to and how often or why. Once we get this accomplished, it shouldn't be any issues then. They should understand where everything's coming from. Hard part to do a lot of times. One, we're in a hurry to get started. And two, sometimes as managers we kind of shy away from telling people what they owe us, because that requires us to have a pretty detailed plan as well. But be sure that anytime you're leading an organization or managing it, that you have the lines of authority and responsibility set. And then, of course, here's our friend resources. Decide how to best organize resources, particularly your human resources, what people do what, but also understand that each person on your team, each team member will need a certain amount of resources to get his or her job done. So make sure those are allocated in the best manner. Sometimes that distribution will be heavier on one side for one person than it will another, but that might be because they have more to do or need that particular instrument more than the other person. So you can't just simply divide out. Even if you got 7 people and you got 7 widgets, they all get one widget, one computer, one car, whatever it is. You need to go ahead and have a plan established as how you're going to best use these resources, and then also know your team and understand who's best at what part. You can use the method of, hey, who wants to do this task? Raise your hand. But volunteerism doesn't usually work out so well for us in the management world, because many times people volunteer for what it is they want to do, not what they're good at or what you need them to do. So you can avoid having to ask for volunteers by showing up with a decisive plan and understanding who your team is and what you see them where they best fit at, and then relay that to them. Say, hey, I want you to do this because I feel that you can bring the best to the team by doing this particular task. Now let's talk about leading and leadership. What is leadership? Well, your book defines it as using power, personality, and influence, persuasion, and communication skill. It revolves around encouraging all employees to perform at a high level. An outcome of leadership is highly motivated and committed workforce. The book answers that away. I like it. It's pretty wordy. I put it this way. Leadership is getting people to do what you want them to do. It's that simple. So what's the difference between leading and managing? Well, we can go a long time and talk, and there's a lot of different philosophies about that. In my particular role and job, in my profession that I currently hold, leadership is seen as something that is far better than managing. We all want to be leaders and not managers, but the truth of the matter is you're going to be a manager most of the time, and managing is no less important than leading. It's not like the relationship between effectiveness and efficiency. These two are two equal parts. You must be able to manage effectively to lead. The best managers are good leaders. They go hand in hand. So what is the difference? Well, again, leading is getting people to do what it is you want them to do. Now, you can use a lot of different things, as we mentioned in the slide. Your legitimate power that you have, your personality, your influence, your persuasion, and communication skills. Managing comes into the rest of it. Is once they're doing what it is you want them to do, or before it is you're going to use your personality or influence skill and what to do, managing that part of making that plan, organizing that team, putting the control measures in place to ensure that they're meeting what it is you want them to do. So these two do go hand in hand. So some people say, well, I'm a leader, not a manager, or this is a management position but not a leadership position. I don't see the difference other than the two different definitions, but I don't see that you're going to be able to effectively do one without the other. If you'll zoom in on or look at our recording, or if you happen to watch this before our class tomorrow night, we'll get in depth about and ask the opinion of the difference of leading and management and what is it. And usually we have some pretty good discussion with that. But for the purposes of tests and everything else, and the purpose of being a leader or manager and leading an organization effectively, what you need to know is that leadership is getting people to do what it is you want them to do. Management involves everything else in between that, what it is you want them to do, and actually them doing it. Business leadership is such a hot topic for people. Even though this is a principles of management class, we're going to expand a bit about this a little bit. As a side note, I do teach a leadership class. If you get a chance to take that for your business career elective, I think it's a really good class. Sign up for it. Love to see you in that. And we'll get more into what leadership is there and more of the art of it. But what is leadership? In the book again, influencing someone to work willingly toward a predetermined objective. So now I want you to take a few seconds and think about who are the greatest leaders of all time. Who got people to do what they want them to do. And don't think in terms of, I want you to go and dig a ditch, so they dug a ditch, and they're really good to get people to do that. I'm talking about the influence that leaders have over people or societies. So their overall goal was a leader to influence the world. Or a particular nation or a particular event, and they were able to do that in such a way that it did affect it largely. So think about that. Here is my opinion of some of the best leaders there are. I got them in order. We can argue the order of them until we get down to number one, but I'll go over them why I thought they were, and maybe we had some of the same on the list, or at least for the same reason. So number 10, Ronald Reagan. He saved the country from pending economic failure and credited with ending the Cold War. So the way he went about the Cold War, even though he inherited that war, he was the guy that gets credit for ending it and finally breaking the Soviet Union's back, so that we can move on to the next part. Now, we can talk a whole nother class about the consequences of the Cold War ending, but it was his will to do so, and he was able to do it. Next is Winston Churchill. He motivated his citizens to resist the Nazis. Prior to him coming on the scene and pushing hard like he did, many people capitulated to Hitler and wanted to make concessions. He didn't do that, didn't want the people to do that, and even though it was a great cost to them and very high likelihood he would lose, he still motivated citizens to resist the Nazis, and as we know, turned out quite well. England never fell. Next, Martin Luther King. He risked and lost his life for a noble cause via civil disobedience, but he inspired an entire nation to change its ways. What he did was he got people to willingly, without violence, He got people who were in power to willingly give up a certain amount of power, and reversed a lot of the negative trends that we had as a nation. Next is George Washington. He did lead the American Revolution and displayed unusual bravery, which led to our country being founded. It's very doubtful without George Washington, or at least the likes of, we would have been able to get this revolution off the ground at all, let alone be able to sustain it for as long as we did and ultimately win. Next, Abraham Lincoln. He led us through our darkest days, also through the Emancipation Proclamation, free the slaves. The country was split, and a lot of people in the North on his side was looking at it completely different. He decided to let them stay, or wanted them to stay, the nation, to keep it together, and through some very tough times did so. And meanwhile also happened to make the Emancipation Proclamation, which was unpopular not just in the South but in the North as well, but was brave enough to do that to gain the support that he needed, or even though he might have lost some support for it, but did that. And certainly we came out as one nation, where it easily could have went the other way and wouldn't have been good for the rest of the world, not to mention ourselves. Next is Gandhi. He resisted the tyrannical rule of the British, and he also promoted nonviolence, and because of that, gained independence, and also influenced a lot of other people that through nonviolence, peaceful protests, that you can make sweeping social changes. Number 4 is Nelson Mandela, who spent 30 years in jail on false charges. He was anti-apartheid and ended up becoming the first democratically elected president of South Africa. Number 3, Otto von Bismarck, led the unification of Germany in 1871 and became the first chancellor of Germany. Number 2, Alexander the Great, known as the greatest military leader of all time. He's a man who conquered most of the known world, and his strategies are still studied today and used in the military. And number 1 is Jesus of Nazareth. Knew he would eventually die for his faith, a faith that is still going strong today, I'm proud to say. Now let's talk about the control process. The book defines it as the ability to measure performance accurately and regulate organizational efficiency and effectiveness. And the slide also mentions you must, as a manager, decide which goals to measure. This is certainly true. The control process really gets after your effectiveness part. When done correctly, it should show you where you're at on that roadmap towards your goal, or the end state of your project or task that you have in front of you. The control process is easily missed by managers. The benchmarks should be set prior to ever starting the task, how you're going to measure it. If it's not missed altogether, another mistake managers make is somewhere along midway through the process, when they're not meeting the goals, or they feel like they're not meeting the goals and when they should. What a manager do then is start setting the control measures in place of how to look at it. While this is better than not doing it at all, oftentimes the end result is confusion amongst the team, some animosity as to why now are you looking at this, or I wish I would have known that beforehand. So again, the key about the control process: 1, do it and ensure that it accurately measures things that pertain towards your goal. And then, of course, number 2, it should be addressed in the planning phase, is how you're going to look at what it is that you consider success and how you're going to measure that. Managers are used in a variety of ways in various areas. A good generic term for the principle of management is a department, and the book defines it as a group of manager employees who work together and possess similar skills or use the same knowledge, tools, or techniques. Just remember that pretty much any organization is going to be broke up into groups, and then typically that group will have a manager, a leader of some sort put in there. Different places and different ways of doing business will call them different things, different names for your managers, team leads, and stuff like that. And also the departments can be called different segments, how they want to break it down. Newer companies, especially in the tech world, they have some fancy terms. Typically, though, or always, groups are going to be broke down, and the generic term that we use here for that is a department. And the takeaway here is to understand how it is you're broken up, and typically, and where you want it to be is that you possess the same skills, or use the same tools, or you have the same goal in common. Otherwise, you wouldn't have it broke up that way into a department. Next, we'll talk about the levels of management. Again, these will be generic terms. Again, depends on which organization you're in and how they define these layers. But no matter what organization you have and how streamlined they try to be, they will have layers. And ultimately, it's like the pyramid shows, if you keep asking and pushing high enough up the chain, you will hit it to where basically one person or one board has a common function and the responsibility of for the entire organization. So the pyramid goes like this. You have first line managers, then you have middle managers, top managers, and then CEOs. First line managers are key. Oftentimes overlooked in the training arena. Shift leaders, foremans, people like occupations like that. So an example would be, hey, I do a really good job working, let's just say, at a fast food chain. Good worker. I've been there a couple of years. I know all the processes, and good track record with being at work on time and dealing with people. So they moved me into a first line manager, shift manager position. Certainly a leader, and every bit as critical as a middle, top, or CEO in the chain, because this is rarely where the rubber meets the road. You're leading the people. This particular first line manager leads the people who deal with the customers. So their success is critical. However, many times we overlook their training. So they were moved up because they did a good job, but does that mean they can be a good manager? Well, certainly they can, but that doesn't mean that they don't need the training or looked at that way. Middle managers is a lot of times entry-level management as well. Hey, I've now graduated from college. I have my new business degree, and I'm going to start as a manager. So you have several first-line leaders under you. So you'll have some amount of training, and not always, certainly not the case, and some people move later in their career to middle management, but a lot of times your middle management is people who are new in that field. They have the education, just not a lot of experience yet. Then next you move in the top managers. This is people who have typically been around a while in that particular industry and knows what's going on, or are brought in for a specific purpose. And then of course you have the chief executive officer. You can name it different ways, but that's the person that is hired to ensure that the mission is completed or the goals are reached on a daily basis. And then they have the team under them. For the purposes of this class, and what I want you to know and understand is, once you graduate with a business degree, you moved into middle management, you'll have a certain amount of training, but you'll also have first line managers that are going to be under you. Or you might go right into top manager, CEO, I don't know. But if you do find yourself with first line leaders or managers right under you, it might be worth your while to ensure that they have the proper training in the leadership side, because they are certainly valuable. They wouldn't have been there if they weren't, and they moved up in the fact that they know and understand the organization that they're working for. But like I said, oftentimes they have not had the formal training. So do not overlook that if you have the opportunity to train them in the leadership and management skills, some of these that you might pick up in principles of management. So some of the skills that you'll have to have as a manager and that you might want to pass on to your first line leaders or develop in them or at any level that you're at are conceptual skills, human skills, and technical skills. The conceptual skills is defined as the ability to analyze and diagnose a situation and distinguish between cause and effect. Simply put, is you got to understand what the problem is, what caused it, and what it's affecting. You will need to be able to push emotion aside again and get right to the root cause and effect. Therefore, being able to determine the best course of action to correct the problem or alleviate any other of the effects that it might be having. Next is human skills. It's the ability to alter, lead, or control the behavior of other individuals or groups. It's very important for managers to have human skills. We have all probably worked in that arena where we have that one person who is excellent at what they do. They're very technically proficient in their job. However, they're just a pain to be around. They don't get along well with other people. Those jobs are certainly needed in certain areas and very important. But if you're desiring a career in management, you will need to be able to develop human skills. Along those lines, we do have technical skills, though. You still do need to know job-specific skills required to perform a particular type of work or occupation. You definitely need to understand the organization that you're leading or managing and at least what those skills are capable of and doing that. And then, of course, you need the technical skills of a manager. One of the reasons you're taking this class is, the principles of management. Understanding each principle, it would be defined as your technical skills here and understanding that. So you understand that you must plan, organize, then lead, and then control. So that would be speaking towards the technical skills of a manager. So you need those. Which one of these is most important? I mean, do you need to know your technical skills the most? Is it best that you have the human skills? Is that more important than the conceptual skills? Just something for you to ponder and think about. Next, we're going to talk about core competency. So what is core competency? Well, the definition that the book has is a specific set of skills that allows an organization to outperform its competition. But simply put, it is what you do that makes you you. Companies all do a lot of different things to stay in business, pay their employees, move products, sweep the floors, that kind of thing. But your core speaks to exactly what it is that makes you you. Your core competency should create a competitive advantage. A competitive advantage is, put you ahead of your competitors, quite simply put. So, what examples can you think of? One comes to mind as one of the largest retailers, or the largest retailer out there is Walmart. So their core competency would be able to provide low-cost items at a very high volume to the public. And they do that better than anybody else. That creates a competitive advantage because they have more choices and lower prices than anyone else. And on the whole, no doubt you can find products cheaper elsewhere. But where can you go and have all of those choices at one place and overall become and do it cheaper? And then it creates competitive advantage again because, well, quite frankly, it puts all the other companies out of business for the most part. Another term that we'll be using throughout the course is restructuring. Restructuring is simplifying, shrinking, or downsizing to lower operating costs. Some companies that have done that is Dell, Nokia, Xerox. I'm sure you can think of some examples of places that have done that. Today's economy, restructuring is a big deal, if you would. Most companies are looking for better ways of cheaper ways of performing or getting the product out to the customer. And that's by usually shrinking or downsizing, which means less people, less overhead. So where does that come into play for us? Well, as managers, you won't see a very robust system of management. Many times managers are also operators as well. They take out mid-level management. So in our world, restructuring typically means it hits everybody hard, but management, if everyone could cost you if you're sitting somewhere in that middle, or if you don't possess the technical skills to do the job just like a regular employee and also manage. One example for me that comes to mind for a company now, it's been quite a while, this industry has done this as a whole, is rental cars, enterprise specifically. So you go see the manager at enterprise, they will also be the person checking in your car and handing you the keys to your car. Now, they're also responsible for setting schedules of everybody else there and general managerial duties. So while they are the manager, they also have the ability to run do what everybody else does. And not only they have the ability, they're expected to. They're one of the ones in there actually operating as a clerk as well. So that's what restructuring ends up coming and being, and that's how it affects us in management. Also, there's things like automation, computers, robots that can also cause that. But typically, corporate restructuring is, hey, I'm going to ask more from you for less. So typically, you do more, you get more money. Restructuring speaks to the opposite of that. And this is how most companies think and look at their strategic planning. How can I restructure, get more, for less? Another term that you need to be familiar with in the corporate world or business world is outsourcing. That's contracting with other companies to perform a work activity, usually in a low-cost country or abroad. There are 3 million jobs, well, this is old, but 3 million jobs have moved abroad since 2000. That's straight out of your book. Now, we know, being 2016, that we've had way more jobs moved abroad. Dell alone, at this time, in 2000, employed 12,000 people in India. So the obvious reasons for outsourcing is cheaper labor, also less residuals, less people having to retire, less people having to worry about, less human resource issues to worry about. So even though it could be more expensive on the front end to pay for outside labor to do the job, the residual effects can be a lot cheaper for you as well. So it's not just moving outside of the country to do the job for cheaper labor. One of the biggest outsourcers now today, because I know this because I'm a part of it, is the U.S. military. We have contractors doing just about everything for us except the fighting. Used to, we cooked our own food, we moved our own supplies, and we did our own maintenance on our vehicles. While certainly we still have those abilities, today that is 99% contracted out. So all the way even forward into Iraq and Afghanistan over the last 10 years, we've had contractors on the battlefield cooking for us, taking care of our maintenance on our vehicles and our equipment, and also moving our supplies and everything else from us. Government does this at a high cost. However, they do not have to invest into what they have to pay for a soldier. Typically, a soldier comes with the benefits that the government is having to pay and a lot of other rights and things that go with that. So if you look what a veteran is out to receive, it's a whole lot cheaper to just hire a contractor, outsource that job if it's a non-combat role. So we're doing that very much every day. The next term I want you to be familiar with is empowerment. And it's defined as giving employees more authority and responsibility over their way to perform their work activities. Now, we've all heard the micromanager, at least I would hope so at this point in your career, you've heard micromanagement, which is bad. Empowerment is good. Micromanagement is the opposite of empowerment, which is not giving anybody the authority to do their job and tell them exactly how to do everything. Which, as you can see, if you do that, or you can understand very easily, that doesn't make you near as effective. Can it make you efficient? Possibly. but not as effective. The best way to be effective is to give the authority and responsibility to the employee to do what it is that they need to get done. It's real easy a lot of times to pass the authority down to someone. The responsibility is a tough one. That's where the micromanagement comes into place. We don't, a lot of times, well, it's just easier if we do it ourselves, we think. But as a good manager, you're going to have, as a manager, you're going to have several people under you. And to be good at your craft, you need to have the ability to get the best out of each one of them and the most out of each team member. And to do that, a key term in this is empowerment. So just know that when you are looking at organizing your team, you want to think in terms of empowerment, giving more authority and responsibility so that they can perform what it is they're supposed to do. One way to ensure that you have empowerment, but yet they do not go off of the reservation on you, is through good control measures. So you let them do what it is they're supposed to be doing, but because your control measures are set up prior to ever taking on the task, you can check at predetermined intervals as to where they're at, so that you can make smaller course corrections versus getting all the way to the end, which is the scary part of being a manager, of where you don't want to empower someone. You get all the way to the end and realize they're way off from where you want them to be. So again, empowerment is a good key term. Without proper control measures, though, it becomes a very daunting task. Okay, I mentioned a little bit earlier what a competitive advantage is, but just to recap, it is, well, just like the term says, it is what gives you an advantage over your competition. The book has 4 building blocks to ensure that you get to it. Efficiency, innovation, responsiveness to customers, and quality should equal your competitive advantage. Now notice we didn't have effectiveness in here. It doesn't go in here because effectiveness is once you have achieved a competitive advantage. Then you're being effective. If that's what your goal is to do. In businesses, to make money, the competitive advantage, it is your goal. So effectiveness is really the competitive advantage. That's really what gets you effectiveness. So yes, you do need to be efficient. It's not a bad word. It's just not what effectiveness is. 2 different terms. Innovation, you need to be able to innovate in your field and come up with new ways of doing things. Certainly responsiveness to customers. You've got to be able to know your market and respond to what your customers need. And then I'd always a quality. You got to have a quality towards any product that you put out there, no matter the product. So these 4 things lead to a competitive advantage. If you are achieving a competitive advantage, then by definition you should be effective, unless you have a really messed up mission statement to not be to have an advantage over your competitors. It doesn't have to say in your mission statement that you want an advantage over your competitors, but typically you're going to say what you want to do, and that will equal that. It will equal you beating your competition at that particular task. Okay, we're getting to the end of chapter 1. The next couple slides will be the references and the learning objectives to make sure that we hit everything that we should have in chapter 1. Again, this will be the format for each class. Typically 2, 3, 4 chapters a week. This particular week's chapters 1, 2, and 3. So after this show, you take this slideshow and presentation, take this in, and then move on to chapter 2 and then chapter 3. And then from here you should be able to go and answer your discussion questions, your discussion board. Then after all of that's said and done, review everything, and then you should be able to take the quiz at the end. So for chapter 1, you should be able to describe what management is and why management is important, what the managers do, and how managers utilize organizational resources efficiently and effectively to achieve goals. You should also distinguish amongst planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. These are the four principal managerial tasks, and then of course differentiate among 3 levels of management and understand the tasks and responsibilities of managers at the different levels in the organization. And the last of our learning objectives, distinguish between 3 kinds of managerial skills and explain why managers are divided into different departments to perform their tasks more efficiently and effectively, and discuss some major changes in management practices today that have occurred as a result of globalization and the use of advanced information technology. Discuss the principal challenges managers face in today's increasingly competitive global environment. Now, of these 6 learning objectives and the over the 19 or 20 slides that I went over, I did not cover every single one of them. It is key that you read this chapter, all chapters, thoroughly. In a 5-week class, we do not have time to discuss every single one of these. So you will read them in your discussion questions and your forms. We'll get after that. Most everything that was covered should be on the quiz at the end of each week that you do. So if it's on the quiz, we'll have talked about it. But there's other things in the discussions and stuff that you will need to look up and cover. Also, I encourage you to zoom in on the link during the class. It's a 4-hour long class, so all 6 of these things, learning objectives, should be discussed at length. So I'll have a lot more time to go over each one of those, but I will base that off the questions that are asked. When you do zoom in, feel free to participate, ask questions or clarification as we go. It's a small class, so it should be easy to have some good discussion in there. So again, remember, should have by tomorrow a welcome video explaining all this again, and how the class is going to be laid out.